Hey everyone, welcome to the PlexTrack mini-series. This episode will focus on Purple Team exercises and features Bryson Bort. You can learn more by visiting securityweekly.com/PlexTrack series. Welcome everyone to the PlexTrack podcast series, getting the real work done in cybersecurity. I'm Paul Astorian from Security Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be talking about purple teaming. I have here with me Dan Nicklaus, the founder and CEO of PlexTrack. Dan, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. We're excited to be chatting about this today.
I also have Sean Scott, the VP of Success at PlexTrack.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
Love the title. Bryson Bort, founder and CEO of SCYTHE, is joining us. Bryson, welcome.
Good to see you again.
And you're rocking the purple. You got the purple. I guess I got the purple and blue in my shirt too. So we're color coordinated.
I coordinated that last night, unbeknownst to you.
It's awesome. I love it. So in respects of getting things done, it's interesting. You know, Bryson, you made an interesting comment right before we started that, you know, we're doing purple teaming. I think I'd put myself in that boat as well. Before it was really, we were referencing it as purple teaming. So I thought a good place to start maybe to talk a little bit about purple teaming, how it came about. Dan, does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. I think getting the context of where we came and how we got to where we are and what the goal is for it is really important.
Bryson, you want to take that one?
Yeah. Well, let's first start with what purple teaming is, because I think so many folks are like, great, another color. I mean, how many colors can we fit in here?
Red, blue, purple. Yeah.
Why aren't we doing polka dots and stripes, right? I want my red, yellow, and blue polka dotted striped team coming up, and so I think there is fatigue about this. But purple team is not something that's radical. It's not something that's completely new. It's the evolution of practices that have already been there. And so when I was talking about before the show how I didn't realize I was doing it then, it was because that name wasn't there for it. I think of purple team, first of all, simple definition. It's a collaborative, milestone-driven approach to red teaming. That's it. It's just a different way of red teaming. And for those of us who have been doing offensive operations for a long time, there were a lot of us who were looking at, hey, you know, just going away and beating up on our client and then coming back with, look at all the things we found, didn't seem to be the most effective way. And they would ask us questions, and we started to realize, well, what if we brought more of that collaborative nature into what we were doing? And so that's where I found myself incidentally talking around, working on, I really want to emulate realistic adversaries and not just do we wins. And I wanted to help the client get a lot more from the engagement.
Is it more like an exercise, as we would kind of reference in more of a military term? Is that accurate?
So where you can have, so everything's on a spectrum, right? Like you can do red teaming in lots of different ways, and there's that crossover to where it becomes different levels of purple teaming. I mean, the most simplistic purple team is offense and defense working together. But where you're going is you can absolutely use purple team concepts to bring in the executive leadership to have a strategic nature to the understanding of what you're doing. And I think it's good to call it an exercise, because with the milestone-driven approach, we have a very clearly understood left, right limit, scope, and then the actions that our adversary is going to be taking that we're working on together.
Dan, your thoughts on purple teaming, because I know this is strategic to your mission at PlexTrack, to be able to capture the results, right? I think is probably the primary goal, right?
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about like a milestone-based approach, you know, you really need an effective way to not only collaborate throughout that entire process, right? You know, conducting purple team engagements in a periodic and in a strict cadence, not only using external service providers, but doing that as an internal function is really important. And so being able to track those results of each assessment, being able to collaborate on the findings and the fixes and the remediation life cycle are vital to being able to achieve those milestones. And I think, you know, Bryson hit it right on the head in terms of like the community, especially in the red teaming community, has really been focused on this for a long time. I think it's very very a new concept to, your traditional SOC operations or your defensive, engineers. And so being able to understand what the adversary is doing, being able to collaborate during engagements and have a better idea of what the attacker is actually potentially doing on the inside is really important. And so that's why, we talk about, having this milestone-based approach to collaborate throughout that entire life cycle and really truly stay focused on the mission that everyone should have, is like improving the security posture so you can detect adversarial activity as early as possible in that life cycle.
We've used the term milestone quite a bit already. What are some examples of milestones in a purple team exercise?
Go ahead. I mean, I would say, you can start small, and Bryson, you definitely can chime in here too. But I would say, even if you're just getting started, start small. Like, hey, we want to take something from the MITRE ATT&CK framework, take like a technique within lateral movement, and we just want to start. How well can we detect these things? Can we emulate this activity in our environment, and can we detect it, right? And then you continue to grow from there. I love to hear what Bryson has to say on how they set their milestones with some of their engagements.
Yeah, so Dan offered the adversarial-driven milestone, and MITRE ATT&CK, of course, is a wonderful compendium of those. I do like to note it's not a complete compendium. They're still discovering new ones. The SolarWinds hack uncovered a few new techniques that are going to be added to it in the next version. But there's also the defensive-driven milestones. Maybe we want to look to see if our firewalls catch certain things. Maybe we want to see what our EDR does or doesn't do. And so there's different approaches from different angles. And yeah, I mean, fundamentally, anything you're running on the network is technically going to be adversarial. So it's going to fit into that. So you're naturally going to be doing the TTPs. The things I like to stress here is that that minimum scope, of course, is going to give you minimum value. If I'm just looking at one command, that's a very simple check. The full spectrum of that is I want to be able to evolve where I'm working step by step through a realistic overall campaign. And the reason for that is context is so important. My favorite example to give to that is like screenshots. We all take screenshots all the time. Well, when is a screenshot good or when is a screenshot bad? And being able to start to put that in the context of your environment by working that within, well, I know if I see somebody doing these kinds of things, then I can start to tell where a screenshot preceded by these actions and by these followed by these actions is credential theft, because that leads, like going to Dan's example, to this kind of lateral movement. And this is how that looks in my environment. Being able to tie that whole thread together now gives you a holistic assessment of the people and the tech. And then, of course, going to the exercise part, you can bring in process to it. And now you're really doing a very realistic, complete assessment of all aspects of defense in your enterprise.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because, a lot of directors of security or CISOs today, they're asking they're starting to ask deeper questions. We've come to this age in our, industry where we've invested a lot in our cybersecurity infrastructure. And now we want to start seeing like, how well is it working, right? Are the things that we've invested in, like the firewalls, like the EDRs, are they actually being configured correctly? Are we working? Do we need to replace them? Do we not even need to have them at all because they're pointless? And so I think that, an effective milestone-based approach with the Purple Team really helps to identify the answers to those questions. I'd be curious to know what Sean has to say related to some of those discussions that he's had with, some of our customers. But
actually, I'm actually going to harken back actually to my DoD days a little bit. Paul, you asked the question, is a Purple Team engagement like a military exercise? In the world that I come from, it's not like an exercise. It is the exercise. Mm-hmm. And to tie it in with this milestone-based approach is every good exercise starts with, planning requirements. What do we want to learn out of this? And, to Bryson's point, it could be an offensive objective. Are we susceptible to these things? Or a defensive objective? Are our defenses going to protect us against these things? And so while absolutely 100% agreement with Bryson's discussion about the need to step through all phases of a campaign to really effectively test all those things, one of the challenges that I am seeing today with the customers and partners that I'm working with is just, quite frankly, the tyranny of the now. Very few people have Purple Teamer in their title, and Purple Team is a thing that's brought together by, with people who have other responsibilities. And so some of the bigger challenges that I've seen in the debriefs of our partners who are actively using PlexTrack as part of their purple team engagements is just they overscope. They always put way more in than they ever have time to actually accomplish. But instead of, I think, a more effective approach is, let's be realistic about what the milestones are that we're trying to achieve in this particular engagement, but let's plan more of them so that we can get to the full campaign testing over a defined period of time in a realistic way.
How do you balance testing the process and testing the various defensive tools, right? Because it sounds like you don't want to narrow the scope so much that you're only testing a few different processes, maybe a few different tools, but maybe perhaps focus on some of the tooling first. Like, how do you structure it so that you can look at all of the various investments you've made in technology and testing those particular components? Is that an aspect to this, to purple teaming?
I would definitely say this, and I'll probably have a few comments that punt it over to Bryson, but I would say the iteration and the continuous assessment lifecycle is really something that needs to be honed and driven, right? It's not a we're going to do this once a year and have a big adversarial campaign where they go through all the major attacks and techniques through the lifecycle, but that should be kind of your goal each year, is like that's what we're building up to, and in my opinion. This is what we've seen, help our customers kind of get going and get into a just a continuous assessment mindset where, you're going to set goals each month. Like, here's the things that we want to, show coverage in and start to build up to that full campaign. And I think it really changes the mentality of, hey, it's not just a point in time exercise, it's a continuous thing as well as a training opportunity, right? The blue team can really learn a lot from, what the red team is doing in real time, right? And not have to focus as heavily on, the aftermath, but, learn during the engagement. Here's what they're doing. Here's what our defenses are seeing or not seeing. And so, I think it's important to realize it's not only a component of your assessment program, but also your training program. But I'd love to hear, what Brian has to say. Bryson.
Same thing, just add an S. So first, like the naked picture, I mean, this is why Dan's team and my team work together. Our platform allows you to very easily put these things and then continuously use them as you want to and grow from there. Going back to your question, Paul, I mean, scope can be defined again by whatever that ROE is, right? If I'm just doing this in a lab on one host, then I'm just looking at host controls, and that's the scope of that. If I'm doing this in a production environment, maybe I start to include the fact that the IR part of this doesn't know what's happening, and so they respond to this like a real assessment, kind of like what you would get out of a black box red team. And so I can now see what that process looks like, tied to the tools of what should they have seen, when should they have seen it, when did they see it, and then measuring their response time on that. And then again, this is what the SCYTHE platform does, is it allows you to repeat that. And the value of repetition is the fact that, one, things change in the environment, right? A business is constantly trying to do different things. Different users are doing different things. Everything is changing. And that's affecting what your defensive stack is able to do. Being able to have that visibility is valuable. And the part that I get into, because it's very easy to start looking at what we're talking about here, looking at the MITRE attack framework and going, well, I just have to check off all those boxes and now I have complete defense. That's not how it works. Do not use the MITRE attack framework as a checklist or as a bingo card. You will find yourself with a false sense of security, no pun intended. What you'll find as you do this over time is you'll start to establish these metrics that kind of approach a natural, mature security of, this is the percentage we're able to detect. This is what our response times are on that. And combined, that will give the CISO a really good feel of how mature, robust, and maintained that organization is, because it's going to be something that's constantly like gravity trying to be pulled down. So the more you run it, the more you naturally are going to keep whatever that number is.
And during this iterative process, I'm assuming, like, I want to know how much the offensive security team is guiding the defensive security team to go, well, we bypassed this control, and here's some guidance. Like, how much is the knowledge transfer about the guidance of, here's how you tune that sensor, here's how you apply that patch, here's how you change that configuration and monitor so that you do catch it the next time, and now let's do it again? Is the red team providing that, the blue team providing that, and what's that collaboration look like?
Full and open collaboration. Red team's techniques are not secret wizardry to be kept.
Right.
They're to be shared so that we are assured that those happen. And this is one of those things where we've talked about for several years, that there's a tension inside the offensive community around, well, if I burn my techniques, how am I supposed to test you? And the reality is, when we go to this collaborative approach, it's not about red winning each time, right? A great example is, what's a good one? Making sure that you have, allow listing for binaries. So only these binaries should be able to run in my environment, and checking that at multiple points throughout the enterprise, because you might be surprised that controls are not uniform. So let's create, a standard malicious payload and name it some exe and see what happens. And we're going to run it at multiple places, and we confirm that those controls all worked. Check. So we've now completed, that basic component of working on a host. Next step, let's add that malicious payload from this exercise to the allow list. Now what we've done is we've basically, for not a lot of money, right? That was basically free to do that. We've given you the equivalent of what a true adversarial intelligence can do. They can do that. They can find a way to break that control. So instead of us breaking it ourselves technically, by doing that, we've still acted like that tradecraft was successful, and we're able to continue on the campaign, and you didn't have to spend a lot of money to run down the technical piece.
I love that, because I'm not asking Bryson to go steal a code signing certificate from Microsoft to do it, right? We can simulate that.
Yeah. So it's now bringing the assumed breach, not just from that's what starts the campaign, but it's now assumed breach across each part of the TTP. And going back to the original question, red is not losing techniques, because red's purpose is validating that blue's controls are working to the best of their extent. Once we've done that, we take the next step, and we keep going down that line in order.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a great point, is being able to track and communicate. Here's all the things that we did, right? So I think red teamers have just naturally not had to document a lot of the procedures that they conduct in an assessment. And so as an organization matures, those reports may become much smaller in terms of the findings, and so they may feel self-conscious. At least I used to, if I was a web pen tester, but hacking into organization and having a really small report makes you feel like you didn't get much work done. But through this collaborative exercise, and using platforms like SCYTHE and PlexTrac, you can actually document, here's all the things that we've executed and attempted over time, and really start to show your trends. And I think that's an important piece of the puzzle, is that this is a growth exercise. It's not a compliance framework, right? MITRE ATT&CK framework is not a compliance framework, and you hit it right on the head. You don't check all these boxes and then you get a certification that you're compliant. It's an evolving set of, these are the things that are being seen in the wild. That now that they exist, so at a minimum you should be able to test against these things, right?
And I think to really squeeze the most value of the time when you're actually in the exercise, that transparency and collaboration has to be real time. One of the things I didn't find particularly effective about some of the exercises that I've been in the past is that even though we say, we give lip service to 90% of the learning happens in the debrief, if it's not until we have that aha moment and it's 7:00 at night and everyone's tired that you fully comprehend what happened, you've missed all those opportunities throughout the day. So however your process is set up for your engagement, you really need to have the tooling and the culture in place for the real-time collaboration. The keeping of the secrets can happen throughout the engagement, but if we're keeping them while we're doing it and not being fully transparent about all the actions that are taken, then we're definitely missing out on training opportunities.
Does the blue team change controls during the purple teaming engagement? In other words, Bryson, back to your point, okay, I've got this whitelisting binary defensive control, but the first engagement with the purple team is, well, we bypass that control. does the red team then coach the blue team, like, go fix that and let's rerun it again? Or do you wait to the end, or is it some mixture?
You improve as you go. So we've all seen this in pen testing and red team engagements where they go away, they come back, they drop the big report.
Right.
They come back a year later and do something the same, do something different, drop the same report because it wasn't fixed, right? This solves that. We're working with you as we go, and we're fixing it. And it's more than just fixing it. It's also tuning it.
Yeah.
Because that's going back to that process of my ability to respond. Well, the hardest part for blue team is, first, of course, is, am I even logging and seeing the events?
Right.
Once I know I'm logging and seeing the events, how do I get through all that noise and to provide context so that I can respond to what really is a problem? Because that's what the purple team is doing, right? It's generating functional noise to reduce the amount of noise in the environment.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really interesting to me, because I often find that a lot of the improvements can be process, and it sounds like the purple teaming is addressing both the technical controls in addition to the process and communications
together, right? Yeah. They have to go together.
Yeah, I almost see it as kind of that the general security team and the security engineering function or operational function is really taking steps out of the playbook from just your software development lifecycle, and now the application security development lifecycle, where trying to do things at speed and at scale as things are changing all the time, right? In the software development lifecycle, code is getting pushed all the time now. So how do you create as minimal friction as possible, but keep the security focus and the testing and the validation there? And I think that's where the purple team is really functioning an important role as we continue to grow and mature, within our industry. And, so I think we've honed in on that. Yes, security is 90% process, right? If you have all these tools, but don't have a way to manage them, to monitor them, to configure them effectively, then they're just shelfware. And so really using the purple team concept and function to improve your security posture, get into a continuous assessment mindset, maintain an assumed breach. I think that's another good point, is that this is always in an assumed breach function. There's nothing that the SolarWinds hasn't taught us that everything needs to be an assumed breach at this point, right? We can continue to focus on phishing exercises and security awareness training. It's important, but somebody's always going to click on a link. Something's always going to get through, right? So continuing to hone on that defense in depth and making it a continuous process, and that's where that automation really helps come into play as well.
So I'm going to push back on Dan on that. It does not have to be assumed breach, right? It doesn't have to be assumed breach, right? When we talked about like the allow listing for application execution example, you can do that the hard way if you want to. And there might be value for your organization to spend money and significant resources, right, to figure that out. Going to the assumed breach model. So as a former Army officer, I keep everything stupid simple because I'm not that smart. The blank look is not fake. And so the way I break this down is there's 3 phases to an attack. Reconnaissance, I need to collect intelligence, so I put my target package together. Access, I need to get in. And then post-access, what do I do? And so assumed breach is just saying, I'm going to start in a post-access environment, because going to Dan's example, like with SolarWinds, and like, again, we'll see probably something next week and the week after that, there's always going to be a way in. Part of that is because it's not only a technical problem. So there's always a way in. But there can be value in understanding what you look like at the reconnaissance phase. And there can be value in understanding how easy or hard is it to get access, knowing, of course, that you're not really comparing against a true capability, but it is a simulacrum of a snapshot of that understanding. The reason assumed breach is valuable is, again, one, it is going to happen. And so you might as well start there, right? 2 is contextual business risk. What an attacker does to you starts in the post-access phase. Access just gives me shell. Post-access is where I steal your things or I'm, breaking things. Being able to work with what you can control as defense, because this is one of those things where defense always feels like, oh, this is just what happens to me. Well, here's an area you can actually control it, right? Those are your hosts that you have controls on and your people that are there. that's your space. You can control that. And so focusing the effort on bringing those components as best in your control to really highlight the things that can happen. That's why the assumed breach model is so valuable. But I do want to caution, that doesn't mean it's the only way that you can do things. You can still do it the hardcore way. And there are definitely organizations that has value for.
I completely agree. Yeah. And I think kind of where my perspective was on that is that, that there's been a lot of focus on just getting in, right? And once they're in, it's just easy, right?
It's the donut example you had right before we started,
keeping
right?
people focused on what happens post access. No, but I completely agree. Yep.
It's that hard, crunchy outside and soft, chewy middle we were referencing with donuts earlier. But my question is, when you think about where to start and focus a purple teaming engagement, and I'm sure the answer can be it depends, but do you focus on, from a blue team perspective, where I think I'm strong, or do you focus on an area that the blue team believes we might be weak in? Or do you identify those things and then kind of map a strategy?
I'll give my perspective, and then I'll punt to Bryson. But when I was a security director, we started doing this internally. We had a small blue team, had a couple guys on our team that had some offensive experience, but not a whole lot. They had gone for they actually achieved the OSCP, so we're really excited about that. So we just sat down as a team and we thought, okay, where do we think, what does our gut, say, like, here's where we think we're weak. We've invested in this next gen firewall. We've tuned that for the last year, and we've got a SIM that's, providing some pretty honed alerts, so where do we actually think that our weaknesses are from a gut perspective? And that's really just the context of your environment. And so that's where we started some of those purple team exercises, taking kind of chunks at a time out of those, tactics in the attack life cycle. And so we started with, something around like lateral movement and privilege escalation. We felt like we might have some gaps there. I think that's going to really depend on the context of the environment. But that was the approach that we took, and it did show fruit.
And I would piggyback on that, Dan, that while a lot of organizations are not going to have the level of maturity necessary to get to this level, if you've got any way to derive local threat intelligence, if your SOC is not just playing whack-a-mole and responding, but actually doing some roll-up and providing some sort of ideas and feedback about where do we think that bad things are at least being attempted. But once again, you've got to have a certain level of maturity to have the ability to derive local threat intelligence.
Yeah, I think that really brings it together. It's where is your maturity, because that's going to drive your focus. If you do not have a lot, you're probably right. Maybe validate what your MSSP can see, your EDR, AV. What actually does it do? I mean, the fundamental thing here is we're validating our assumptions. Almost every single one of these engagements, I think there's only been one out of all the ones I've done where they said, hey, we want to check this. We're pretty confident that, we're paying this amount for this product. And it didn't catch it. It didn't work. It did this or didn't that. And it's not a fault of the security product vendor. It's the fact that you can't just install a product and it'll work with its default configurations. There's the difference what happens in a lab, and then there's what has to happen with security being tuned to actually work in an environment where it's not stopping users from doing the legitimate business process they're trying to do. So you're validating the assumptions that matter, and then you're again, going back to what we said at the beginning, you're iterating continuously from there to maintain that maturity and tuning that you've achieved.
How does PlexTrac help us with our purple teaming exercise, and to a certain extent also, how SCYTHE plays into the picture?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we provide a platform for that collaboration and the continuous visibility into the testing assessments that are going on, and being able to pull in, resources like results from SCYTHE, right? So that you can automate the activities, but, it provides that central collaboration point, and then you have that historical record over time to be able to track analytics and continue to report up the chain. Here's how we're growing. Here's how we're making progress in our security posture. So it really really serves as that mechanism for the central point for collaboration and being able to report the issues that are coming in, be able to quickly remediate and track the remediation life cycle within PlexTrack. And then, we integrate with SCYTHE, so being able to bring in the automated campaign data so that, you can continue to focus on that continuous assessment mindset.
We've talked a lot about milestones through this segment. And one of the key things that I find that our partners find value in is that through runbooks, PlexTrack really helps you keep the engagement on the rails. Once you have taken the time to do the proper planning, you've set the milestones, you've identified the procedures you're going to undertake to test whether or not you've achieved those milestones. That's harder than it sounds. And PlexTrack is providing our partners with a collaborative way to run through the execution and ensure that throughout the entirety that there is that real-time transparency and that everyone is staying on focus, that there's not squirrel going on here. We got off on this tangent, saw an opportunity and took it. No, these are the things that we want to accomplish. We can definitely add things in real time. If there are targets of opportunity that we wish to engage, we have an easy way of bringing that in as well. But ultimately, we talked about the importance of process. Process is great, but you also need the tooling to ensure that everyone follows the process. So PlexTrack helps keep us on process and assist with all that data collection to track that remediation so that the next time we do this, hopefully we're scoring better.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. This concept not only applies to a purple teaming exercise, right, but to lots of other activities that you may do in a business. And that is, there's so many different tools we can use to collect this data. Like, we're going to share some notes on Notion, Bryson, and we're going to do a purple teaming exercise, right? Then we're going to cut a PDF and we're going to share it on OneDrive or SharePoint or some mixture of however those products work together, right? Then we're going to email it around, and then there's going to be Slack notifications. And what I like about PlexTrack is we can really solidify that this is the platform, because in a purple teaming engagement, in just speaking with all of you, super important that everyone's literally on the same page working off of the same platform. I think that provides a tremendous amount of value. Dan's like, yeah, you should buy it, right?
Yeah.
Let me pitch PlexTrack here, right? Like, the biggest thing I think here, besides keeping it on, because one of the challenges to the way we've done things over time, and now we're saying, hey, we're going to make it a little harder for you because we're bringing more people into the room, we're bringing more into the room, we're bringing more process, and that's more effort. And that's the daunting part of this stuff. Well, there are tools that help make that easier, right? PlexTrack makes that easier. And so for not a lot of money, you suddenly find something that's doing what a tool is supposed to do, which is make your life easier to run this. But here's the part that I think is really going to appeal to a lot of folks. What if your output reports were written for you? It does it for you. It's so cool. Like, I don't have to do all that writing. And that's the part we all hate the most. Everybody wants to be a elite hacker. Nobody wants to be the technical writer. PlexTrack does that for you.
And arguably, it's the most important and most valuable part of the entire engagement is that report.
If I can't communicate it, I can't make it happen.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
We've also discussed one of the challenges being limitations on bandwidth and time and overscoping. And one of the things that I really enjoyed seeing as an addition to purple teaming is the introduction of these automated threat emulation tools like SCYTHE, because we've only got so many hours. Everyone's got jobs to get back to. This engagement's going to have an end time. If we want to obtain the most coverage, how can we automate that? In some of the debriefs recently that I've had with clients who've been performing purple team engagements, a lot of the challenges and failures, quite frankly, came from failures of them to implement the tooling. Things just didn't work. They couldn't test the thing because they went and they pulled down some procedures, from some website and tried to run them, and it failed. If you can have a turnkey solution that allows you to test things in an automated fashion, you can definitely gain a whole lot more productivity. So we're huge fans of tools like SCYTHE, and that's why we're happy to partner with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if there's one other thing that is an important concept is that, everybody knows that there's going to continue to be a shortage of talent and skills in security. And so, everybody points to how do we automate more of these things, and, things like Scythe and PlexTrac working together really help keep your team focused on the right things and eliminate all of the wasted time so that you don't have to go hire 10 more people to get the same output, right? And keep morale up. I mean, there's nothing more morale breaking than, oh, I just completed this 3-month assessment and now I got to write a report that's going to end up being 500 pages long, right? So
yeah, really speaks to getting the real work done. So Sean, Dan, and Bryson, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks,
you.
Bryson.